Right, okay. You lot, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can catch all of our videos. And if you're really interested in the Krays, join our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. You'll find over 1,000 videos and thousands of images. We're moderated and friendly. Come and give us a try.
In the autumn of 1933 I was born, followed 3/4 of an hour later by Ron, both, like the little sister before us, with a full head of black hair. If Charlie's birth broke the ice in her relationship with old Jimmy, ours brought about a complete thaw, and in no time, it was like it had always been. One close, happy family. Twins were rare enough to catch the attention of everyone who saw them, and from what I'm told, the whole family shared Charlie and Violet's pride. Our home in Steen Street was in rooms over a furniture shop, and though my memories of the years spent there are few and hazy, one of the strongest is of playing day after day among the closely stacked tables, chests of drawers and large ornately carved wardrobes. The mind being what it is, looking back, it seems as though Ron and I did nothing else but play hide and seek, make little secret camps, and climb daringly through the maze of what today would be valuable antiques. At least Mum always knew where to find us. I remember when I was about 5 or 6, Aunt Rose saying, "How would you like to live right next door to me? Then I could take you out every day." I trusted Rose, but adults can say some funny things, so I looked at Mum. But she was laughing and nodding, saying, "That's right, we're going to move near Nanny Lee." Within the week, Uncle John had brought his lorry round and helped Dad to load up our furniture, and we were on our way to 178 Valence Road, to the little part of Bethnal Green known as Lee Corner. With Nan and Grandad close by, Aunt Rose and Uncle Bill next door, and Aunt May and Uncle Albert next door to them, it seemed that all the people I was closest to were all around me. The house was a tiny 2 up, 2 down, but to a youngster it was a huge palace. That it was damp, crumbling, and shaken day and night by passing trains was of no concern to me. It was a proper house, and I felt safe and comfortable there. Dad must have felt settled too, because he had hundreds of business cards printed advertising the fact that he bought gold, silver and clothes. Dad had always liked to drink, but now he was in the habit of stopping off for a bit too much on the way home from selling what he'd acquired on the knocker. This took a fair bit out of the cash he'd earned. After squaring Mum up with her housekeeping, because no matter what he did with his money, she never went short, he might not have enough left to go out buying on the next trip. So he'd approach a friend of his to ask him to front him up for the week. This was more often than not another dealer by the name of Arthur Harding, a notorious gangster who'd run with and fought against characters like Dodger Mullins, Alfie Hayes, Jimmy Spinks, and the Sabini family, who we were more than likely related to. So good was the old man's reputation as a buyer, Arthur never hesitated, as he knew his money was safe and would always be returned with a bit on top. For a while Dad went out in search of second-hand clothes to buy with Uncle John, his brother-in-law. At first John was reluctant because, not being so outgoing, he hated going from door to door, but he gave in and agreed to take Charlie and 2 or 3 others on buying trips in his big old Chrysler. They'd often go as far as places like Bristol, all sharing the expenses. Money was hard to get though, and being unable to afford the 5 shillings to tax the car, Uncle John laid it up for a bit. Arriving home one night, he was surprised when Grandad Lee stuck £8 in his hand, saying, "There you go, son, that'll keep you going for a while." When John asked him what it was for, his dad, pleased as punch, said, "Sold that old motor for you." So that was my dad's transport out of the window, and he was back on the trains. By now we had reached school age, and it was with lots of nervous excitement and each clutching one of Mum's hands that we were taken around the corner and across Dunbridge Road to Wood Close School. What impressed me most of all were the floors. Strange for a child to notice, but in contrast to the cracked, faded linoleum we had at home, the rich warmth of the highly polished parquet flooring seemed special in some way. Something else that imprinted itself on my young mind was the appearance of many of the other children. While I accepted as normal the fact that I wore sturdy shoes, a warm pullover, and when needed, a waterproof Macintosh, most of my playmates seemed to have a uniform of frayed shirt, shorts cut down from an older brother's trousers, and broken-backed plimsolls. I suppose this was my first glimpse of the desperate poverty suffered in the East End. I remember telling my mum about these scruffy kids, and although the thought had never crossed my mind, she told me never to make fun of them because it wasn't their fault that their fathers didn't have work. Although she wasn't a particularly religious woman, she'd say, "When you say your prayers tonight, pray for your school friends that haven't got decent clothes and enough food, and for all the poor people in the world." And I always did what she said. It was tempting to ask God for a red bicycle or a mountain of Indian toffee, but I never cheated, even though no one would ever have known. So every night I'd put my hands together and earnestly believe the world would change because of my asking. I never lost the habit, and even today still say a prayer for the less fortunate. I took to schooling like a duck to water. I may not have been top of the class, but I was a long way from the bottom. My main highlight of the day was when all the pupils were gathered together in the main hall first thing in the morning to sing such hymns as Down in Virginia, the Maple Leaf, and the Four-Leaf Clover. You'll see the headmaster's choice had a rather international flavour that would have been lost on us kids as we sang our hearts out, accompanied on an echoing piano. Another daily ritual for us younger ones was the rest period after lunch. We were encouraged to sleep for an hour on camp beds. First, in an orderly line, we would collect one of these stretcher-like beds that by their drab olive-green colour were obviously army surplus from the First World War, and set them out in the hall, or during the summer in the playground. Then, under the supervision of a teacher, to enforce a no giggling or talking rule, we'd stretch out and try to sleep. I was always too full of pent-up energy to consider dozing off, but with a healthy respect for the teacher, I'd lie quietly studying the ceiling, or watching birds or occasional aeroplanes in the sky. After that, it was back to lessons for an hour or so, with one eye on the round white-faced clock as I waited for what I enjoyed most, the rough and tumble of playtime. I can't remember anyone ever standing still. Every second of this precious 15 minutes had to be spent at top speed. We'd chase or be chased over every inch of the yard, whooping and screeching like Indians, only pausing long enough to dash into the run-down toilets for a drink from the old stone sink before tearing off again. Any child fortunate enough to have brought or stolen an apple on the way to school would be accosted for the core, and be king for the moment, would gnaw as close to the pips and pith as possible before magnanimously handing it to whoever he might want as a friend, or more likely to someone he didn't want as an enemy. Hygiene was beyond our comprehension, so it was not out of the way to ask a boy or girl for a few sucks on the sweet they were obviously eating by the bulge in their cheek. It says something that within reason this was rarely refused. While the girls whiled away their time with skipping ropes and games that required a lot of sing-song rhyme and hand clapping, the boys, when they could stand still long enough, played mock battles, though the fine line between a playful spar and something a bit more serious was easily overstepped. A punch to the nose a bit too hard in the spirit of a friendly tussle could turn laughing gladiators into ferocious animals. Immediately, a cry would ripple through the playground, "Fight, fight, fight!" and in moments, the two would be surrounded by a howling mob eager to witness a bit of bloodshed, but at the same time, pleased they were only spectators. As there was always a teacher on playground duty, the fight would be stopped quickly, either by the two having their ears boxed, or worse, dragged off for a few strokes of the cane. My very first fight was with a bully by the name of George Tappin. He was bigger, older and heavier than I was, but I wasn't intimidated and gave as good as I got. In fact, I was enjoying it until a vicious punch in the face knocked me to the ground. I would have carried on, but a shout of "Teachers coming" sent us running all ways. When I got home that night, my elder brother Charlie, nearly a man of 13, took one look at my black eye and said, "It's about time I taught you how to box." So, with his help, my dad's, and some coaching from my two fighting grandfathers, Ron and myself took our first trained punches towards eventually becoming professional boxers. In the world outside our little corner of Valence Road, events were taking place that would soon bring upset and change into all our lives. Remember, these things are happening in the months leading up to my 6th birthday, so I can't pretend that I knew what was going on. As far as I could sum things up in my mind, some man called Mr. Hitler was going round fighting everybody. Dad showed me a picture of him in the paper, and when I said he looked like Charlie Chaplin, he laughed and slapped me on the back. Kids at school were saying that Mr. Hitler would come over and drop bombs on us, but I didn't believe them. War was declared, but life went on just the same as before. When we weren't at school, Ron and myself would be playing in the street or sharing our company between Aunt May and our young cousin Rita, Aunt Rose and her son Billy, or pestering the life out of Grandad Lee to box with us or tell us more stories. Dad was still away a lot of the time earning money for us, Mum said, but our young lives were so filled with things to do, I can't honestly say we noticed he wasn't there. Like most kids, as long as Mum is there, nothing else matters. But slowly, things did begin to change. We were all issued with gas masks in a little satchel. These were made of rubber and had a mouthpiece like a duck's beak. Luckily, we never had to use them because they smelled funny and made you feel queasy. At school, we started practicing air raid drills. A bell would ring, and we'd have to march to the concrete shelters that had been built in the yard. The first time we heard practice guns being fired, it caused a bit of alarm because we thought Hitler had arrived. On the streets, it seemed like there were cars, lorries and soldiers everywhere, but still nothing happened, and life went on as usual. Just in case it did, at home we helped Mum stick strips of brown paper on the glass in all the windows, and for night time, black sheets so no light could be seen. Then the bombing started. Being too young to have any imagination about the devastation being caused, Ron and myself thought it was exciting as we lay in the double bed we shared and listened to the distant boom of explosions. Nothing came near us, so we felt quite safe. We never realized people were dying because of this until Mum told us to pray for the families of all the people who were killed in an accident just round the corner in Mile End Road. Uncle John brought the story home first, though I didn't learn the details until I was older. An air raid warning had been given on the wireless. Then transmission was shut down in case the signal could be used by the enemy for tracking. At that time, John was living in Wilmot Street in Bethnal Green, but as he didn't have a lot of faith in the shelter near his home, he decided to make his way to the underground tube station that was under construction, a 5-minute walk away. When he reached the Salmon and Ball pub, he saw there was a great crowd of people milling outside the station opposite, so he thought he would hold back until it cleared. One of life's awful coincidences caused what happened next. At the same moment as a railway employee opened the large iron entrance gates to the underground, an anti-aircraft gun was fired in Victoria Park. The crowd, thinking it was a bomb, surged forward and down the steps. As no handrails had been fitted yet, it only needed a couple of people to trip in the panic of getting inside for a chain reaction to set in. As those in the front fell over those who had fallen, more frightened people were being pushed on top of them from behind. Over 200 people were crushed or suffocated in no time. Among them were Dickie Corbett, a boxing champion, Uncle John's trailer mate from work, his wife, and the wife of Johnny Boxer, a friend of Uncle Joe's. Her baby was saved by being passed over the heads of those still on their feet. It was the first of many wartime tragedies that affected me deeply. A week later, I was to have a brush with danger myself. A bomb aimed at destroying the railway line behind our house blasted Ron and me from our bed, smashed every window in the terrace and took half the roof away. We ran down the stairs to our parents and brother Charlie, who were at the front door looking up the road. Further down Valence Road, we could see a mountainous cloud of dust creeping into the sky from what used to be a large building called Hughes Mansion. Later on, we found out that 130 of our neighbours had been killed as the whole place collapsed on top of them. Ron and I were sad that one of the casualties was a midget who always had time for a friendly word with us. Thankful that none of her own family had been hurt, but still frightened for the safety of her children, Mum decided it was time to join the thousands who were fleeing London. Inner London schools had closed anyway, most being taken over as bases for auxiliary forces. But imagine our excitement when Mum said we were going away for a bit of a holiday. We'd had day trips to Margate and Southend, but the only real holiday we'd ever had was when Uncle John and his wife Maud had taken us to her mother's boarding house at Clacton-on-Sea. For me, the memory of days spent on the beach are hazy, as we were only about 3, but it stuck in my Uncle John's mind. Years later he told me, "Talk about a handful. You were a right pair of little bastards." I'll always remember the day that Mum, Charlie, Ron and myself stood at Euston Station waiting for a train that would take us to Hadley in the Suffolk countryside. Clutching our little brown cardboard suitcases which contained our clothes and treasured toys, we were confident because we had our mum, but everywhere I looked were groups of bewildered-looking children waiting to be evacuated. Many were crying with the fear of the unknown, away from their families, while most had had little brown labels tied to their coats which gave names and destinations that could be as far away as Norfolk or Scotland. Dad wasn't with us for the journey, but what we didn't know was that he got his call-up papers for the army telling him to report to the Tower of London. He'd had more than one of these letters and they had all ended up in the fire. Now he was taking the first steps that would put him outside the law for the next 12 years. My first sight of the house we would be living in took my breath away. It was bigger than 4 or 5 houses in Valence Road, and not only did it have a garden as long as our street, it was set in fields and woods the like of which I had only ever seen in picture books. That period spent living in Mrs. Stiles's mansion in such lush surroundings was the beginning of a love for birds, animals and the countryside that has stayed with me until today. Brother Charlie, who was then almost 15, got a job in a local shop, and when he wasn't working, I should think he was chasing the village girls. But Ron and I, with nothing else to do but play, were in paradise. All we had known until then were the grimy streets around our home and a tiny backyard. Now we were to experience total freedom in a landscape that stretched as far as the eye could see. Every day was an adventure. With a bottle of lemonade and a bag of arrowroot biscuits, we'd explore for miles around until the fading light drove us home. We'd climb trees or make clumsy fishing rods from sticks, a piece of string and a bent pin, though never once caught a fish. And in the innocence of the time and ignorant of conservation, we'd search the hedgerows for birds' nests so that we could add another egg to a growing collection. To part the leafy branches of a hedge and discover a woven nest containing 4 turquoise jewels had a breathtaking excitement that was indescribable for 2 East End kids. That brings us to the end of another episode. The story will continue in the next one. Thanks for watching.
We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.